Hello and welcome to the, I suppose, a very summary edition of Transported. This month we're looking at a couple of stations which were closed, well, before the beaching axe fell. And we're starting at the station of Glystop. Now Glystop, or Glystop as some people call it, would have been the first stop after Seamer, heading down to Hull from Scarborough. And the view we're looking at as I'm coming up is the view to Glystop village from the station. There's a mile of deserted country lane between the two. As I'm turning around now again towards the railway, it's an interesting place to come because of course we have the old style level crossing gates, not half barriers, not lifting barriers, but proper crossing gates, albeit metal ones rather than the more traditional wooden slatted ones. And Glystop's, you know, some stations you can go, well, should never have shut it. Glystop is a difficult one. With it being so far from the village it purports to serve, there are a couple of houses up here, but not enough to support the railway station. It was an obvious case for closure. It's not even a case that new build in this area has made it more viable. Really didn't. The new build in the village is still a mile away. You can see the signal box now, a very neat little signal box. And in fact, I'm looking at the gates on the Hull side of the crossing, and that they are still the old traditional wooden ones. Some rather exciting iron poles holding everything up. So the suspension crossing gates, and as I come round here, we can now see Glystop station. Platform still in place. It's single track here now, has been since the 70s, and you still see the, well, it would have been the Hull bound platform, that's still there, albeit covered in a lot of undergrowth. There's a semaphore signal further along, that's again, along with the gates, that's rather nice throwback to the days gone by. And you can see on the platform, which is the Scarborough bound platform, or the northbound platform, there's some rather nice flowers on there. I'm going to go for a walk down the road here as along we go. Absolutely beautiful rural area, and I say there are houses down here, so it's all very lovely. Glystop station is an interesting one. It's not exactly in line with the architecture on the rest of the line. I'm not certain why. Now no station. Yes, that's the dog that lives at the station. It's now a property that people live in. There's a telephone box outside. There's the old wooden crossing gate, which has been replaced, still in the garden there. And further up the station, cottages, which are presumably were built for the staff of the station. But it's rather nice. Nice awning boards, interesting roofs. Yeah, you're right, I would like to live here, I absolutely would. There's an iron frame up there, up towards station cottages. It's a private road, so I won't go up it. I think you probably could walk up it, but it's probably best if I don't. I'm trying to work out whether that iron framework is actually old railway wagon. I suspect it is, without it. Think on, there's two little dogs looking at me. Yeah. Making sure that I'm not doing anything wrong. So we'll just wander back up again. And if I look over there, I can see the line heading off down towards Hull, well, Filey and then Hunmanby and Driffield and so forth. But as you can see, well, as long as I can see anyway, you're surrounded by fields and agricultural land, so it's not really the kind of land that's likely to be built on, you know, to even build it up. But it is such a lovely location. The station itself is gorgeous. I really would really be very thrilled to live there. It's really very nice. And here's Glystop box. Unusual box in many respects. It's ground level. It's not up above the ground. Just move out the way of this car. Fascinating little box. Brick built, not wooden like some of them are. And gentleman shutting the door there. still got the older style name board outside. There's also a newer bit of railway infrastructure there. Not sure what's in there. Possibly a chemical toilet or something. There's various pipe works coming out the bottom of it. And as I say, it's a shame that such stations as Glystop aren't really available for reopening. Now, as I say, this was double track. Part of the deal that saved this line from complete closure in the 70s involved the fact that certain changes would be made. Primarily it was the closing of some of the other stations on the line. Burton Agnes, Millthorpe, a number of these stations were sacrificed to save the line. Millthorpe particularly will be one that was very similar to this, not really near anywhere whatsoever. But I say Glystop and the station we're going to look at very shortly, Cayton, both of which were closed prior to that. As I say, it's fascinating, as I can see, and as you can see if you're watching the video version of this, there is a kind of low-level building comes out of the front of the I don't know how you describe the architecture of the main station, but it's got a hint of mock Tudor about it, I suppose, to some extent. But an unusual station, a lovely station. You can imagine yourself sitting in there, perhaps in the early 50s, waiting for the train to Scarborough, with nothing but the sound of the birds and the occasional rumble of the porter's trolley. So there we are. That's Glystop station. That's Glystop signal box. And I say there's another semaphore signal still protecting the line there. Interesting, I suppose, a health and safety thing is that at the top of the signal box we've got a proper little anti-falling off cage, for want of a more practical term than that. But we're going to move on now. We're going to move on along to Cayton. We'll have a look at that station next. Well, with a rather splendid horse next to me, I've arrived at Cayton now. A couple of things. When I was talking about Glystop, I was talking wrongly when I said it was the first station away from Seam. It's the second. Cayton was the first station. Different closure dates. As I mentioned before, the closure predated Beeching's axe, and well, Lotus Super 7 Caterhams, I think they are now. 1959 was a closure date for Glystop, 1955 for here at Cayton. Now, unlike, can't see if I turn round, but unlike Glystop, that's still pretty much as it was in terms of local people from the point it closed. Cayton now, actually Cayton Village is extended, so not very far up the road. In fact, if I just turn around I can see there's extensive housing right around up there, which could provide traffic for the station. And again, it's an unusually interesting station, and also very large for the area it's called. A bit like Glystop, it would have probably been about 3/4 of a mile away from the village when it was built and in use. But the unusual thing about Cayton to me was the fact that the station was at right angles to the railway. And I'm just looking at the station now, nicely whitewashed, flagpole in the garden, and although you can sort of see some degree of station about it, it's not quite as obvious as you would think that is the main station building. Partially because it's actually quite a distance away from the track. I mean, not miles by any means, but it is actually slightly up the banking above the railway and away from it. And that's how it was. You came into the station building, just cross the level crossing now, came into the station building and came down steps to get to the platform. Now, unlike Glystop, there's no sign of the platform here on either side. I think it was all on one side. Yeah, I can't remember if it was staggered or not, but yeah, completely obliterated. Just that extra 4 years of closure seems to have lost Cayton all trace. In fact, if you come by on the train, you wouldn't know there was a station here. Glystop, yes, you can see there was a station. But we have what we had at Glystop in the form of, I suppose, a container, I suppose, really, but that contains equipment for the crossing gates and so forth. Unlike Glystop, of course, there's no signal box here, and there are simply half barriers to protect the road when a train is due. This line, of course, has just recently recovered its service by virtue of being back to a 1 hourly service. Now the singling here, as you can see, the single line here, formerly double, is often considered to be a real mistake. As part of the cost-cutting exercise we mentioned earlier in the 70s, it was decided that they would single much of the line, north of Bridlington certainly. In retrospect, not a good move. Yes, it may have saved doing double track maintenance, but at the same time it limited the train service. When I first moved to Filey 5 or 6 years ago, there was only opportunity to get a train was every 2 hours, and this was purely down to, so the railway said anyway, to the fact that it was single track and they couldn't schedule anything else into it. Not so. Now we've got a 1 hourly service, but basically this single track goes a little distance there. Forget exactly where it becomes double again, but it gets double into Filey, stays double track through to Humberby. That's right. And after Humberby, it's then single track again right through to Bridlington. As I say, it causes a huge bottleneck, really. But we should be thankful this line exists at all. As I say, in the 70s, the idea was that the line would be closed, and additional replacement bus service would be laid on. Ludicrous for a holiday area, which even to this day, despite the fact many people come by road, is still an important link for tourism in this area. So another little look up by Cayton Station. Now Cayton Station, of course, is in common with Glystop now a private residence, so I don't want to dwell too much on peering through people's windows and so forth, because it's it's somebody's home, isn't it? So just going here past a little lay-by. Now I don't know if there's anything to do with the house or whether it's one of those little pull-ins if you've got a large load that's crossing, so you can contact the signal. It does have the contact the signalman telephones around the place. But here we go, station house. I say, not as railway as Glystop, but nonetheless, fine building. But as I say, a very large building. Two houses nearby. I'm not sure of their provenance, but I suspect they may be of railway origin as well. Certainly the far distant one, the one that is now Apple Tree Cottage Cattery. For the simple reason it looks that way. It looks like it was using North Eastern Railway architecture. So I'm making my way back to the car now, and we shall probably have another glimpse at the railway a little bit further up. Well, with the sound of mowing lawns and so forth in the background, we reached the third of our trilogy of disused stations, and for this last one we've actually swapped lines. We're no longer on the Scarborough to Hull line. We're now round on the line coming out of Scarborough and heading off to York and the rest of the world, if you will. And it's one that may be familiar to, particularly to these looking at the Transporter Video Extra, because it's in the title sequence of that. It's Weatherthorpe. Now Weatherthorpe, so we have been here before, but concentrate on the passing of the Scarborough Spar Express rather than the station itself. And as we can see, along with Glystop, we still have traditional crossing gates here. We saw the signal box here. It's slightly similar to Glystop in that the supports for the crossing gates are kind of iron girdery kind of thing. Unlike Glystop though, these are not tall ones, these are a little bit lower and they don't have the suspended section on. I'm just going to cross across the level crossing. There you heard something going across. It's interesting, there's red flashing lights on here which are the sort you get around roadworks. Obviously quite a temporary thing. I suspect that along with other gates on this line this will be converted to barrier crossing at some point. But if I come round here, I can find there is a Network Rail yard. There we go. Which not rail connected anymore, but is there for presumably the vehicles to come in. But it's the disused section we're looking at today. And looking up there, I can see what I assume was the station master's house. And then here, in parallel with a lot of stations in this area, is the actual station and building. You came into it parallel to the road, which crosses at right angles to the railway. Rather than, in a lot of cases, you go into the rear of the building, walk through, get your tickets, come out onto the platform. At Weaverthorpe, you come in at the side and you go through, and you would have gone to the platforms. No sign of platforms left, though the station building is here. And once again, semaphore signals as we had before. Let the car go past. So much of interest of the days gone by here. Gates just shutting. There you are, you can hear them clanking close there. And you can see kind of where the platform was. You can see on the bottom of the walls of the station, thick heavy bricking, and that would have been the height of the platforms. Weaverthorpe signal box will actually see a moving train at this one. Obviously, I don't know what it'll be. What time is it? Let me just check the time. It will be a York service. There's now a very regular service of trains to Hull out of Scarborough leave on the hour. Trains to York leave at 25 to the hour, or 34 minutes past to be absolutely precise, but that's the case. Just stand next to Spencer Nettles. We'll talk about the signal box. Weaverthorpe signal box. Again, a bit unusual. Brick base, concrete clad top, and the very fact we're at Weaverthorpe is a real northeastern railway thing, especially in this area. The reason I'm saying that is that northeastern, I've probably mentioned this before, but it was absolutely paranoid about the passengers getting confused between stations. So we're actually only a fairly short distance away from the quite large village of Sherburn. But Sherburn, well, you might think you're in Dorset perhaps. I don't know what to actually might have thought Sherburn in Elmet was probably because that was on their system, but nonetheless they decided to call it Weaverthorpe, which is quite a distance at the other side of the valley. Now all the stations on this line with the exception of Malton were very early closures. The reason being that they're all very much in this pattern. They're in the middle of the valley, but the people living on the Pickering side of some miles in that direction, people living on the side that's, well, now the A64, the main York Road, they'll start heading out, so they'll start heading to York. The people living on this side are again a few miles away from the station, so they were never near the areas where they were purported to serve. There where the gates are opening and the cars are going across. So let me see if I can see a little bit more of the buildings which remain. And there's Weaverthorpe. Again, it's somebody else's house, so I'm not looking at it very extensively. Yeah, you'd say I don't like staring in, but there's the signal box is fascinating, and again, more or less at right angles to the line. You know, the broader side of the signal box is parallel with the road, not the railway. So I'll go across there, which is where I'm actually parked. And whether Weaverthorpe box lasts after they convert to half listing barriers, I don't know. It's a long way to York, so it's quite possible they will survive. And let's go around here, past the nice wooden steps that take you in. There's the downstairs room. I suspect this is now used by Network Rail, given that there's inside there a little heater, and there's actually a diagram of the track plan around here. Imagine where I am now, apart from being the down platform. Would have also been the goods yard if I go just behind the car here. There's some quite heavily built walls. The concrete top, but they may have been part of a building, may have been part of the goods shed. I couldn't honestly say, but it's quite possible that they well, almost certain that they had railway usage at some point. It's hard to tell. With it being an early closure, the trees around here could have been just mere saplings at one point. But there we go. Let's just go over here and we can see again the railway station. Fine bay window, much more like a house than a railway station in many respects. And currently painted in, I suppose actually it's the LNER green that they took to painting their stations in, rather than I suppose very few people would choose to paint the stations in the pale blue and cream and tangerine livery of British Railways North Eastern region. But there's Weaverthorpe Box again. And so I hope you've enjoyed this little trip out to look at 3 disused stations in the Scarborough area. And thank you for watching and listening to Transported.
Train now approaching